So 2 years ago, I ran my very first marathon, which was the Twin Cities Marathon. My only two goals were 1, to finish, and 2, to qualify for the Boston Marathon, which for my age group means about 3 hours. So fortunate for me, I achieved both of those goals and I finished in 2 hours and 50 minutes, which I'm fortunate enough to have gotten into the 2021 Boston Marathon this year. So after running my second marathon in Boston for the first time, let's talk about my expectations, what gear I used, my nutrition, and how the race went. So let's start with expectations. So for the Boston Marathon this year, I didn't really have that many expectations. My main goal was just to get in, which I knew was going to be more difficult since it was 10,000 less participants than in the past. And luckily I was able to get in. So after I knew that I got in, I just kind of wanted to enjoy the experience and enjoy the race. And if I happen to get a PR, then that's just a cherry on top. So what gear did I use for the race? Well, let's start with my kit. So as a Rad Rabbits ambassador, I wore my awesome FKT trail shorts. I definitely recommend these shorts if you're looking for some that have lots of built-in pockets for your gels and phone and whatnot. For my top, I wore my Honey Stinger Hive singlet since I am a Honey Stinger Hive member, which I use them for my nutrition as well. Spoiler, we'll get into that though, but if you haven't had their products, definitely check them out. And I was one of the few people, especially in kind of the pace range that I was running in, that wore a vest. I wore the Ultimate Direction SJ Ultra 3. I just really like having the ability to access all the stuff I need whenever I need it. Usually when I wear the vest, it doesn't bother me too much, but it was very humid this year, and I did get a little bit of chafing from it, but overall it didn't bug me too much. So for the shoes, I made a whole video talking about which shoes I was going to wear for Boston. Check that out if you haven't. But I wore the Alphafly Next Percent, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. So nutrition is different for everybody. So I'm just going to tell you what I did for my race day. That doesn't mean it works well for you or that you should do it. It's just merely stating what I do or have done. So I started out the morning with a cup of coffee and a boba bar. Then once I got on the bus to the start line, I had a Honey Stinger waffle and drank some Hammer Perpetuum mix. So during the race too, I like to have chews, so I had my Honey Stinger Energy chews, and then I had two 16-ounce flasks filled with Morton 160. Alright, now let's get into the good stuff, how the race actually went. So after gear check at Boston Commons, me and a couple of buddies that were running the race got on the bus to the start line in Hopkinton. From there, we didn't really have too much time. We shed some of our warm clothing and we got to the start line and ready for the race. So the weather was actually really nice for the Boston Marathon. It was like barely in the 60s, like high 50s, low 60s, but it was super humid. It was like 95% humidity, which for me, I'm used to the dry Colorado air, so that was something I definitely wasn't used to. So I didn't do too much investigation on the course. I knew there was lots of downhill, Heartbreak Hill, that kind of stuff, and I received some advice that was, don't take the first 10K too hard. It's mostly downhill and you'll think you're going super easy, but it'll beat you up in the end. So I kept that in mind, but turns out I didn't really listen to it. So let's see here. My average pace was 5:55 minutes per mile for the first 10K. And I was kind of just planning to stay around 6:15 or below, take it nice and easy. But it was downhill, my legs were fresh, it was a lot of good competition around me, and so I just kind of kept at that 5:55 pace. So I was thinking I wanted to stay in between that 6 minute per mile and 6:15 minute per mile pace since I was feeling good. So luckily I was able to do that through miles 7 through 13. Miles 7 through 16. I was in between those pace ranges closer to the 6 minute mile per pace. And that was thanks to those rolling hills, the cheering crowds, and definitely because of the competition that was around me. I was able to attach to groups and have them kind of pull me. So looking at the splits here, my half marathon split was 1 hour and 18 minutes, which I thought was reasonable, and I was hoping I could hold on to that momentum for the rest of the race. But then I hit mile 17 and my quads started getting super heavy and super tired, and I knew that wasn't a good sign because even on my first marathon, my legs didn't really start feeling tired until the wall at mile 20. So I think that was because of me going fast at the beginning in those downhills, and I hadn't trained a ton with downhills, so it really took a toll on my quads. Not only that, but around mile 17 the course starts getting more uphill and you get less of that downhill and kind of gentle rolling hills. So the infamous Heartbreak Hill is around mile 20, but for me it felt like mile 17 through 20 were Heartbreak Hill just because my legs were so dead and there were so many kind of up and downs that I just couldn't lift my legs up to go up the hills. But fortunately I was still able to hold on closer to that 6:15 goal pace, and my average was around 6:17 minutes per mile. So at mile 21 I definitely hit a mental and physical wall, and it was going up some hills and my pace slowed down to 6:45 minutes per mile. But then after I got to the top of the hill, I started going downhill, and I actually ran with Shalane Flanagan for a little bit, so that definitely got me excited and allowed me to pick up my pace. It was kind of cool to run along a Olympian. But after that little surge, my legs felt more and more like lead. My average pace dropped down to 6:40 minutes per mile. Alright, so now let's look at the final results. I crossed the finish line in 2 hours and 43 minutes and 11 seconds, which comes to an average pace of 6:13 minutes per mile, which honestly I was pretty proud of that. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't really have a time in mind, but I wanted to get a PR, and as the race was going on, I kept in the back of my head that 6:15 pace, it was probably good for me, so definitely happy with that. Plus, it was a 7-minute PR from my Twin Cities marathon. For place, I was 394th overall out of the 15,383 runners. Alright, so how did the Alpha Flies do in a marathon? Well, I was a little worried I wasn't going to make the right choice just because it's not as secure of an upper, like there's not as much padding that I typically like. However, I did really want to use this cushion and feel nice and light. And fortunately I did make the right choice because the upper was super comfortable. I didn't have any blisters, no bloody toes, no lost toenails. I was actually surprised how well it felt, especially going down those downhills. My toes weren't rubbing against the front, and the rocker really helped on those downhills. The cushion was awesome, it helped absorb that impact, and then the air pods in the plate really gave me that nice pop when I was really picking up the pace, you know, doing those 5:55 minute per mile splits. So overall, I had a very positive experience with the Boston Marathon. The spectators were amazing. The whole town was in marathon mode, like the whole weekend. It was really cool to see a bunch of runners just going about their business, taking in the sights. The race was an awesome course. It had beautiful views, especially in fall, which isn't typical since it's normally in April. And I definitely recommend this race if you get a chance to run it. So I'm not sure what my next marathon is going to be. I think 2022 I might take it a little easier and do maybe some local marathons. I'm going to do a trail 25K, probably a few half marathons thrown in there. In summary, I just need to write some new goals and really focus on training for those. So this was my first race review video. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. Should I keep making them? Give me any suggestions. And while you're down there, let me know if you've run Boston before. Give me and some other people some tips, and just kind of what you thought of Boston and if your experience was similar to mine. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep on running.